Well, let's take a look at the Sunday papers and the websites this morning with Stuart Hughes from BBC World News and Rajvi Glasbrook-Griffiths, who's a deputy head teacher in Newport, also a writer for Planet magazine. And since I think it's the first time that Rajvi's been with us, we'll let you go first.
Thank you, Vaughan. I'm probably going to do a similar story to Stuart, actually, but to both the Observer and the Sunday Telegraph and many other papers have led with the possibility of £10,000 fines for those who may fail to self-isolate. People who break the coronavirus rules may be fined up to £10,000 from 28th of September. It's part of their carrot and stick approach, as the Observer says, where around 4 million who are on low incomes and in receipt of benefits who cannot work from home will be given stay-at-home payments of £500, possibly, to compensate for their earnings. But to offset that, we may have police who are ordered to be out on patrol in areas with the highest infection rates to check people who've been ordered to isolate are complying, and the fines may start at £1,000 for a breach, but could rise sharply. And it's expected that Professor Whitty may be addressing the public by video as soon as tomorrow about this, as cases have hit 4,422 apparently, which is topping £4,000 for the £4,000 in number for 2 consecutive days for the first time since early May. So there is a steep rise.
Depressing stuff, Stuart.
Yeah, it's perhaps not surprising that we've both picked up on that story. There is only one story in town this morning in the Sunday papers. Just to read you some of the headlines tells you all you need to know. Pretty much, it's not very often actually that almost all of the Sundays splash on the same story, but they have this morning, which tells you tells its own story. The Observer £10,000 fines for failing to self-isolate as infection soar. The Sunday Times £10,000 fine for people who fail to self-isolate. Men on Sunday, £10,000 fine for leaving the house. The thing I want to pick up on is that figure of £10,000 that's getting all the attention this morning, and understandably so. But I have to say, I am a little bit cynical about it. It certainly makes Boris Johnson look like he's taking tough action to reduce infection rates. But this £10,000 fine would only apply to what are termed egregious offences and serial offenders. I think it's really unlikely that these £10,000 fines are going to be dished out left, right and centre. It's a figure designed by Downing Street to be a headline grabber, and in that it's obviously worked. But what I think is very likely is that any hopes that we may be moving significantly beyond those dark days of March and April are certainly going to be dashed this week until there's an effective vaccine for coronavirus. This 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards approach to reducing infection rates may happen repeatedly in the months ahead. Unfortunately, we're going to have to get used to it.
Indeed, depressing. Rajvi, what else have you seen?
Also quite depressing, the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on Friday from pancreatic cancer. She's of course an absolute giant, a legal warrior for gender equality, appointed by Bill Clinton, and it has a knock-on effect. And the Observer actually led in quite a balanced way about this, because as well as talking about the huge implications now for the divisions in the US, she left as her last last words were, "My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed." Now, as we know, President Trump has already appointed 2 Supreme Court justices, both conservatives, and for him to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg will significantly shift the ideological balance, and that threatens rulings such as Roe and Wade, for example, on the legalization of abortion in 1973. What the Observer does do, however, it goes on by Moira Donegan. There's a very, very moving appreciation and tribute to her life, and it talks about how she was a very strategic, contemplative, disciplined woman and a very passionate feminist. And I think her death has resounded and resonated far across and beyond America for that reason. But as I say, there is a big, implication now, and it's a big prompt to speeding up the election further in America, as it were.
As if it wasn't fervent enough as it was.
Yeah.
Stuart.
Yeah, I think that the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg could redraw the electoral battle lines for the U.S. election. It'll become less of a referendum on President Trump's handling of coronavirus. Instead, it's going to become an ideological fight now over the future of the U.S. Supreme Court. The Sunday Telegraph noting that Trump's campaign sees Justice Ginsburg's death as a game-changing development. What's interesting is that Telegraph noting that a recent survey by the Pew Research Centre showed that even before Justice Ginsburg's death, many people thought that the Supreme Court was a more important issue to American voters than coronavirus. One Republican strategist telling the Sunday Telegraph, Joe Biden wants this election to be a referendum on Trump. Now it's going to be a referendum on who he nominates to the Supreme Court. And it's hard to see how this doesn't help Trump politically. Another way of looking at it, though, is that Justice Ginsburg's passing may galvanise liberals, because she was such an iconic figure, to turn out in large numbers for Joe Biden in an attempt to secure her legacy. But what's without question is that Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death is going to influence the US election campaign significantly.
What else have you seen, Rajvi?
Yeah, two stories really. I've picked up from something in the Financial Times from yesterday, speaking of countries that refuse to accept the return of failed asylum seekers from the EU will face a crackdown on visas to the bloc. But I've contrasted that with Wales on Sunday, which is on page 3, got a huge headline on the march in Penally against the asylum camp that is to be set up there. Police were called yesterday. Up to 250 asylum seekers who will be single adult males, it's now been confirmed, will be housed at this Ministry of Defence facility in Penally, which is just outside Tenby, because the facilities in Kent, which is the other big base, are reaching stretching point. And, about 100 locals turned out in protest, and they were very keen to sort of state that they weren't protesting against the housing there, which is, being chosen because it's COVID compliant, but because they felt it had been sprung on them. And Simon Hart, the MP, said that he'd only been told about the plans last week. But, you do go on to sort of read that there's a lot of fear and a lot of worry in the locality. And similarly, there's a lot of, on the offset of that, there's a lot of sympathy as well. But a lot of concern there and one to watch. But, whether it's COVID safe as well is a concern. And Leanne Wood, the Plaid Cymru prior leader, has said that it's a perverse place anyway, and that's her word, to place people in such a situation. But it's at the moment everybody seems to be failing.
Stuart, what else have you got?
An issue that's been around, bubbling under for several weeks, finally breaking through and getting the momentum and the attention it deserves, is in the Sunday Times. Thousands of families trapped as unsafe flats paralyse property market is the headline. Sunday Times says the Grenfell Tower fire is casting a pall over the whole property market. First of all, thousands of flats with the type of cladding that fueled the fire were spotted. Now it's exposed more than 180,000 flats wrapped in other flammable materials. And next, it could leave up to 1.5 million modern flats unmortgageable because they can't prove the walls are safe. The Sunday Times says that the fire, which killed 72 people, laid bare decades of regulatory failing, a culture of building fast and cheap, and millions of people could have to wait up to a decade for the sign-off that they need before they can sell their property or get a new mortgage. They're trapped and they've got nowhere to go, says Labour MP Clive Betts. Now, in different times, this would be a national scandal. Coronavirus has deflected some of the attention from this issue, so it's good to see it finally getting significant attention in the Sunday Times investigation. The Sunday Times quotes one person from Cardiff, Alex Howe, who lives in Victoria Wharf, who'll get no government help with a £61,000 bill to replace polystyrene wall insulation. Alex Howe says, I face losing everything I've worked extremely hard for. As I say, it's good to see this issue of cheap and substandard housing finally getting significant attention, because the concern, of course, is that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are living in housing that they fear could be another Grenfell Tower waiting to happen.
Indeed. We probably have time for a story each from you. Rajvi.
Yeah, well, it's a comment actually from Keenan Malik in The Observer, and it's in response to Edinburgh University announcing that the David Hume Tower is to be renamed because of his comments. And indeed, he did. There was a footnote to one of his essays which was, explicitly eugenicist, and he takes the view very much that, instead of learning from the, inequities of the past, we seem to be wanting to erase history. And of course, this comes at the back of the Colston Tower and, Winston Churchill's legacy and the Rule Britannia Fury. And he talks of this danger that though we may end up with a cartoonish view of history in a way that's been edited to such an extent that is guided by contemporary needs and ignores the complexities of the past.
Except that some people would say, of course, that we have a cartoonish view of history. We have a cartoonish view of the Second World War. We have a cartoonish view of the nobility of the British Empire.
Yeah, he does sort of address that, actually. But he says that, actually, in order to have a fuller understanding, perhaps we need that full bulk rather than an edited version. I mean, I am very, very much just sort of quoting what he's saying here, but he's... And, ultimately his point is that to rename adds nothing to our understanding of the philosopher, but actually, nor does it take away anything of the racism that people face today. And it's this idea of whether we're improving forward-looking or whether these gestures actually, achieve anything. But it's a good thinking piece.
I think we could discuss it all morning between the three of us.
Absolutely.
Stuart, one last story from you.
Yeah, very quick one from me, because if ever there were a day when we needed some lighter news, it's today. So I'll go to the Mail on Sunday, which says the return of all creatures great and small on TV has irritated viewers with inconsistencies and blunders. To give you one example, viewers regretting the show's lack of farmyard muck, saying everything looks far too clean. Pristine tractors parked in the middle of muddy fields has prompted ridicule online. One suspects the production crew perhaps might be strangers to the reality of rural life. One could say that it certainly shouldn't happen to a vet.
And apparently they use artificial cows' bottoms because it's no longer allowed for actors to mistreat animals in the filming of programmes, which is one of the
Who
most...
knew such things even existed?
Well, exactly. Where is the factory? You can listen again to this programme on the BBC Sounds, the app for music, radio and podcasts. And if you want advance notice of our guests and subjects, follow at Wales Politics on Twitter. Politics Wales is on BBC One at 10 o'clock this morning, and after the news is All Things Considered. Bore da chi.